Day to you. I trust you've had a great week, and it is hard to believe that it's Thursday already. Thanks for giving me 5 to 7 minutes as we look at our devotional for this morning and we look into the Hall of Fame or the Hall of Faith. Today's going to be the last day of the study. If you're reading through with me through Hebrews chapter 11, there are many more, but I'm going to end it here with Rahab and then trust that you will continue to read of the Old Testament saints who gave us a great example of faith that we can mimic. All right, so let's go ahead. We're going to be in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 31. As you turn there, let's do a review for the last day so we remind ourselves what we're doing and why. The Hall of Fame in the secular world was a structure of housing memorials to famous individuals who had been selected as extremely successful in their area of participation, such as sports. And I think of the Baseball Hall of Fame, football, hockey, basketball are the big four that run in my mind. In Hebrews chapter 11, this is our Hall of Fame or our Hall of Faith, an example of people we can look to who lived a life of faith for us to learn from. These were not perfect people. Only we believe only Jesus Christ was perfect. So these individuals had faults, they had sin, but they also were able to walk in faith. And it's encouraging for us. It's encouraging for me to know that not everyone has their life together, but some folks are still walking in faith, but not walking in perfection. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1 tells us that faith is the reality of what we hope for, the evidence of things we cannot see. The commentator Matthew Henry says faith and hope go together, and the same things that are the object of our hope are the object of our faith. All right, let's do a quick review of where we've been studying for the last week and a half to 2 weeks. We started with Abel, and he approached God by God's standards, just like we have to approach certain landmarks. And I use the White House as an example. You just can't walk into the White House just like you can't walk up to God. You got to go by his standards. We talked about Enoch, and he walked in obedience and he walked in faith with God. And one day he was walking on earth, and one day he was walking in heaven. He never died according to Scripture. Abraham, he showed faith by being willing to follow God even though he did not know the destination. Sarah had faith in God's promise when the situation seemed impossible. Isaac, he had faith that conflict can lead to blessings when true repentance is involved. We studied the life of Jacob, and we said that worshiping God, you can have faith in worshiping God even when you don't see the promises fulfilled. And then yesterday we looked at the life of Moses, and Moses had a sacrificial faith. Moses was willing to give up all the earthly pleasures that he was afforded to him as the prince of Egypt, and he leaned in to God's calling, and he had faith that God would continue to bless him as he walked in faith, forsaking all earthly blessings to follow God. All right, so by now you should be in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 31. We're going to look at the woman Rahab today. I have to laugh. One of the hardest things for me during this pandemic is I have not been able to go out and watch people. I love to watch people, not in a weird way. I just really enjoy watching people interact. I love to sit at Walmart or in the park somewhere and just watch people. It just brings me joy because I'm a people person. And one thing that just makes me laugh and brings joy to my soul is when you see people walking and all of a sudden they want to take a selfie or they take a family picture. And I'm going to be a little facetious this morning, but these kids are walking and they're arguing and they're bickering and they're fighting. And all of a sudden mom or dad says, time for a family photo. And everyone stops, has a great family pose, and pretends like they love one another, and they hug together, they snap the photo, and then boom, they're back to arguing. And it just makes me laugh. And I often laugh when I see these folks posing for pictures, looking like they have everything together, even if you will, pretending that they have it together, snap the picture, and then go back to quote normal, which is not what the picture indicated. One of the things I love about our devotional today, it's a story of Rahab. And this woman, she does not have it all together, but friends, she gets it together because she trusts in the Lord and God's sovereignty and God's faith to deliver her. We're in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 31, but really we're going to go to Joshua chapter 2. Let me tell you a little bit about Rahab as you cross reference, which means you're in Hebrews 11:31, but you're going to go back to Joshua chapter 2. This is where the story of Rahab takes place in the Old Testament. Rahab is a harlot. She's also known as a prostitute. And this is a woman that is not leaning into God at all. She does not, if you will, care about God, care about God's standards. She's not living God's ways. She's not following God's boundaries. She's doing what she wants to do. And then all of a sudden, here come the Israelites marching through the wilderness, and Rahab starts to hear about what God does through the Israelites. Rahab, she demonstrates a saving faith. One thing that blows my mind is that she is named as an ancestor of Jesus Christ. In Matthew, when Matthew's given the genealogies, here comes this woman who is a woman that has saving faith, and that she has a life that was not always leaning towards God, but leaning away from God. And she turned from her sin to live a life for God. She demonstrated saving faith in the God of Israel. She was the furthest person from being a follower of God. And then once God got a hold of her heart, she turned and began believing in the God of Israel. Now, when I read a story like this, it always makes me ask the question, how did she come to faith? Well, by now you should be in Joshua chapter 2. Rahab, she believed what she had heard about the God of Israel. And this is what she heard, that she heard that there was a God that was leading his people out of the Egypt, out of the Exodus. He also dried up the Red Sea, and the God who was leading this people was destroying the enemies of the Israelites. And she's watching of all this, and she's observing all this. She's hearing the testimonies of all of this, and she's sitting there going, something is going on. Something is different about these people. Something is different about this God. And that he was the living and true and powerful God. And he was with these people because these are activities or feats or miracles that only God could do. It was not humanly possible. And what a powerful reminder for those of us that believe in God of the power of a testimony, for us to tell people what God is doing in our life. Because there are people that are either watching this or that you have relational equity with, that you have the opportunity to speak truth into their life. So the God of Israel saved his people, and that he would give them the promised land. Everybody knew this promise, and there's one problem with where Jericho is standing. They're in the promised land, and here comes the people of Israel marching through the wilderness, all this momentum behind them, and people are scared, especially Rahab. Rahab hears what God is doing. Rahab believed in the God of Israel, and Rahab believed Israel was going to receive the promised land. And she did not want to be on the wrong side of God's promise. She did not want to stand in opposition of what God had done, because she sees what God has done, and she wants to put her faith because of the miracles and because of the testimony of what people have done, or what God has done in the people. So the two questions I have for us on this Thursday morning as we wrap up this study on the Hall of Fame, the Hall of Faith, is, do you have that saving faith in God? What a great reminder for us today to remind ourselves that no one is too far gone for faith in God. This woman was a practicing harlot or a practicing prostitute, and she was not too far gone to be reminded and to be confronted with the truth, and then have her heart softened towards God, to put her faith in God, that God would love her and that God would forgive her. When you see God work, and when you believe God working, and then you trust or put faith in God, he can radically change your life. So the first question is, do you have that saving faith in God? You might say, yes, I do. Well, then the second question I have for you is, who can you talk to in order to tell them about the great things of God. If you want to read specifically Joshua chapter 2, verses 9 through 11, the spies that go into Jericho, they talk about what God has done. And it's through that testimony that Rahab's heart continues to be softened and she comes to faith in God. If you have that faith and trust in God, it's a great reminder for us the power of a testimony that we can talk about what God is doing in our life. And that can be helping people take that next step in faith. So, two questions. First of all, do you have that saving faith in God? If not, I'd love to have a conversation with you. If you'd say, I do have that saving faith in God, then who can you talk to in order to help encourage them to take that next step of faith? I hope you have a great Thursday. This weekend, we're going to have our worship services in person in the building at 9 and 10:30. We're also going to live stream probably around 9:30. We'll be on our church Facebook page. If you don't go to church and you're not ready to come to church because of the pandemic, I hope you'll tune in to our Facebook page. And if you're not going to a church and you want to come to church, love to see you at our place, either 9 or 10:30. This will be the last week, and then starting November 1st, we're going back to one service, and that'll be at 10:30 with Sunday school at 9:30. I hope you have a great couple days. I'll see you either digitally on Sunday, I'll see you in person on Sunday, or if you go to a church, I'll see you back here Monday morning for the start of another round of devotions on something wonderful somewhere in the New Testament. See you Monday, and I'll let you know what that is. Have a great weekend. I'll talk to you all soon.